Latin America has endured a tumultuous history of intervention and exploitation by the United States and its intelligence agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. This video delves into the dark legacy left behind by US and CIA involvement in the region, shedding light on the devastating consequences experienced by Latin American nations. Throughout history, the United States has exerted its influence in Latin America to protect its own interests. From the Monroe Doctrine to the Cold War era, the U.S. has pursued political, economic, and strategic goals at the expense of Latin American sovereignty and stability. The CIA, operating covertly, played a significant role in implementing and executing these interventions. The impact of U.S. and CIA actions in Latin America has been far-reaching. Political destabilization and the support of dictatorial regimes have resulted in the suppression of democratic processes and the violation of human rights. Economic exploitation, characterized by unequal trade agreements and resource extraction, has perpetuated poverty and inequality, impeding the region's development. Furthermore, the social and cultural consequences of U.S. interventions cannot be overlooked. Indigenous communities have suffered displacement and marginalization, while cultural traditions have been eroded. Latin America continues to grapple with the enduring repercussions of these interventions, manifested in ongoing political instability, economic inequality, and social unrest. By understanding the historical context and acknowledging the destructive impact of US and CIA actions, we can work towards promoting justice, equality, and self-determination for Latin American nations. It is crucial to reflect on the past to pave the way for a more equitable and harmonious future in Latin America. Historical background. The history of U.S. intervention in Latin America is riddled with tales of destruction, exploitation, and political manipulation. Understanding the historical background is crucial in comprehending the extent of damage caused by the United States and its intelligence agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, in the region. The roots of U.S. involvement in Latin America can be traced back to the early 19th century, when the Monroe Doctrine was established, declaring the Western Hemisphere as the exclusive sphere of influence for the United States. This doctrine laid the foundation for U.S. interference in Latin American affairs under the guise of protecting its national security and interests. During the Cold War era, the United States regarded Latin America as a battleground against the spread of communism. In pursuit of containing leftist movements, the U.S. backed dictatorial regimes and carried out covert operations to destabilize governments deemed unfriendly to American interests. Notable events that shaped U.S. intervention include the Spanish-American War in 1898, which resulted in the acquisition of territories like Puerto Rico and the Philippines. The United Fruit Company's control over vast banana plantations in Central America further solidified U.S. economic dominance and influence in the region. The Cuban Revolution in 1959 was a turning point in U.S.-Latin American relations. Fearing the spread of communism, the CIA orchestrated the ill-fated Bay of Pigs invasion in an attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro's regime. This event exemplified the lengths the U.S. was willing to go to maintain its dominance in the region. The historical background of U.S. intervention in Latin America is marked by a pattern of political interference, economic exploitation, and military interventions. Understanding this context is crucial in comprehending the lasting effects of U.S. and CIA actions on the social, political, and economic fabric of Latin American nations. CIA operations in Latin America. The Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, played a significant role in the destruction and destabilization of Latin America through its covert operations. Under the guise of national security and anti-communism, the CIA orchestrated interventions that left a lasting impact on the region. Covert CIA operations in Latin America were part of a broader strategy to protect U.S. interests and counter perceived threats. These operations involved clandestine activities such as coups d'état, assassination plots, and the training of paramilitary forces to overthrow governments deemed unfavorable to U.S. interests. One notorious example is the CIA's involvement in the 1954 overthrow of Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala. Arbenz's land reform policies threatened the interests of the United Fruit Company, a U.S. corporation with significant influence in the region. The CIA orchestrated a coup, installing a military dictatorship that led to decades of political repression and human rights abuses. Another significant intervention was the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, an ill-fated attempt to overthrow the Cuban government led by Fidel Castro. The CIA trained and equipped Cuban exiles to carry out the invasion, but it resulted in a resounding failure, further entrenching Castro's regime and deepening U.S.-Cuban tensions. These interventions were not limited to Guatemala and Cuba. The CIA operated covertly in countries such as Chile, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, often supporting brutal dictatorship and undermining democratic processes. These actions led to the suppression of political dissent, the violation of human rights, and the perpetuation of social and economic inequality. The CIA's operations in Latin America left a trail of political instability, shattered democracies, and countless lives lost or forever affected. The consequences of these interventions continue to reverberate in the region, shaping its political landscape and socio-economic disparities to this day. It is crucial to examine and acknowledge the destructive impact of CIA operations in Latin America to foster a deeper understanding of the historical context and work towards a more just and equitable future for the region. Political destabilization and dictatorship. One of the most devastating consequences of U.S. and Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, involvement in Latin America was the support for dictatorial regimes and the resulting political destabilization in the region. Through covert operations and strategic alliances, the U.S. played a significant role in undermining democratic processes and perpetuating oppressive rule. In pursuit of its own interests, the U.S. supported and propped up dictators who served as loyal allies, regardless of their human rights records or disregard for democratic principles. Latin American nations such as Chile, Argentina, Brazil, and Nicaragua, among others, suffered under brutal regimes that were backed by the U.S. and the CIA. One notable example is the Pinochet regime in Chile. In 1973, General Augusto Pinochet overthrew democratically elected President Salvador Allende with the assistance of the CIA. Pinochet's dictatorship resulted in widespread human rights abuses, including torture, disappearances, and political persecution. Similarly, the U.S.-backed military dictatorship in Argentina, led by General Jorge Videla, resulted in the Dirty War from 1976 to 1983. Thousands of individuals were forcibly disappeared, tortured, and killed during this period of state-sponsored violence. These dictatorship and political destabilization had far-reaching consequences. They stifled democratic institutions, suppressed freedom of expression, and created a culture of fear and impunity. Latin American societies suffered from decades of trauma and division, and the scars of these dark periods still linger today. The impact of political destabilization and dictatorship on Latin America cannot be overstated. The U.S. and the CIA's role in supporting oppressive regimes in the name of geopolitical interests contributed to the erosion of democracy and the violation of human rights. Recognizing this history is essential in understanding the challenges that Latin American nations continue to face in their pursuit of justice, peace, and democratic governance. Economic exploitation. The economic exploitation of Latin America by the United States and the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, has had a profound and lasting impact on the region. Through unequal trade agreements, resource extraction, and the imposition of neoliberal economic models, the U.S. perpetuated a cycle of economic dependency and inequality in Latin America. The United States sought to secure access to Latin American resources for its own benefit, often at the expense of local populations. The extraction of natural resources, such as oil, minerals, and agricultural products, became a cornerstone of U.S. economic interests in the region. Latin American countries were reduced to suppliers of raw materials, while the U.S. controlled the industries and reaped the majority of the profits. Additionally, unequal trade agreements further deepened the economic imbalance. The U.S. imposed tariffs and quotas that favored its own industries, making it difficult for Latin American nations to develop their own economies. This reinforced a pattern of economic dependence, where Latin American countries became reliant on exports of primary goods, leaving them vulnerable to fluctuations in global markets. The imposition of neoliberal economic policies by the U.S. and international financial institutions further exacerbated the situation. Structural adjustment programs demanded by these institutions forced Latin American countries to privatize public assets, deregulate markets, and cut public spending on social programs. This led to widening income disparities, reduced access to education and healthcare, and increased poverty rates. The consequences of economic exploitation are evident in the social and political unrest that has plagued the region. Latin American countries have experienced waves of protests and social movements demanding economic justice and an end to exploitative practices. Recognizing the role of the U.S. and the CIA in perpetuating economic exploitation in Latin America is essential for understanding the root causes of economic disparities and working towards more equitable economic systems. It is crucial to support efforts that prioritize sustainable development, fair trade, and the empowerment of Latin American nations to break free from the cycle of economic exploitation and build inclusive and prosperous societies. Social and cultural impacts. The social and cultural impacts of U.S. and Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, interventions in Latin America have left deep scars on the region. Indigenous communities, cultural traditions, and the fabric of society have all suffered as a result of these interventions. One of the most devastating consequences has been the displacement and marginalization of indigenous communities. In their pursuit of economic and political interests, the US and the CIA disregarded the rights and livelihoods of these communities. Land seizures, forced assimilation, and cultural erasure have disrupted the social fabric and caused immense harm to indigenous peoples. State-sponsored violence and human rights abuses have also taken a toll on Latin American societies. The support for dictatorial regimes by the US and the CIA resulted in widespread repression, torture, and disappearances. The impact of such violence has been traumatic, leaving a legacy of fear, mistrust, and division within communities. Furthermore, cultural traditions and identities have been eroded in the face of external influences and the imposition of Western values. The homogenizing effect of globalization, coupled with the suppression of local cultural practices, has endangered the diversity and richness of Latin American cultures. The social and cultural impacts of US and CIA interventions in Latin America continue to resonate to this day. Healing the wounds and reclaiming cultural heritage is an ongoing struggle for many communities. Recognizing and honoring the diversity and resilience of Latin American cultures is essential in rebuilding social cohesion and fostering a sense of pride and identity. Moving forward, it is crucial to promote inclusivity, respect for indigenous rights, and the preservation of cultural heritage. By acknowledging and addressing the social and cultural impacts of past interventions, Latin America can forge a path towards a more inclusive and harmonious future. Contemporary implications. The destructive consequences of US and Central Intelligence Agency (CIA) interventions in Latin America continue to shape the region's contemporary landscape. The legacy of political instability, economic inequality, and social unrest continues to reverberate, posing significant challenges for Latin American nations today. Political instability remains a pressing issue as many countries in Latin America grapple with corruption, weak democratic institutions, and a lack of trust in the political system. The history of US-backed coups and support for dictatorial regimes has undermined democratic processes and hindered the development of strong, accountable governance. Economic inequality persists as a result of the economic exploitation facilitated by the US and the CIA. Latin American countries continue to face challenges in breaking free from the cycle of dependency and unequal trade relations. The concentration of wealth in the hands of a few exacerbates social divisions and hampers efforts to achieve inclusive economic growth. Social unrest and protests have become increasingly common as marginalized communities and civil society organizations demand justice, equality, and an end to systemic oppression. The repercussions of state-sponsored violence, human rights abuses, and the displacement of indigenous communities continue to fuel social tensions and call for redress. Furthermore, the contemporary implications of US and CIA interventions can be seen in the complex dynamics of regional relationships. Latin American nations navigate their relationships with the United States while seeking to assert their sovereignty and pursue independent foreign policies. Understanding the contemporary implications of US and CIA interventions is crucial in comprehending the challenges faced by Latin American nations today. It calls for a comprehensive approach that addresses political, economic, and social issues, while promoting sustainable development, human rights, and inclusive governance. By acknowledging and learning from the past, Latin America can strive for a more just and equitable future.